It was supposed to be a routine flight from London to Dubai, nothing extraordinary, nothing out of the ordinary. The morning sky above Heathrow was painted in soft shades of gold and pink, the air crisp with the early chill of dawn. Passengers moved through the boarding gate with sleepy smiles and travel cups of coffee, each lost in their own little world. For most, it was just another flight. For Ava Thompson, it was her first time traveling alone, an exciting step toward adulthood, a symbol of her independence, and a chance to finally prove to herself that she could do things without anyone's help. Ava had just turned 18 2 weeks ago. She had graduated high school, packed her bags, and decided to visit her older sister who lived in Dubai. Her parents had hugged her tightly at the airport, her mother holding back tears while her father told her to keep her passport safe and not to lose her phone charger. She had laughed nervously, pretending she wasn't scared, but inside her stomach was fluttering with nerves. The idea of flying across continents without anyone by her side both thrilled and terrified her. Once inside the plane, Ava found her seat by the window, row 17A. She smiled politely at the middle-aged couple sitting next to her, placed her small backpack under the seat, and buckled her seatbelt. The engines began to hum, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, and she watched as the city below faded into a pattern of lights, growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the clouds. She put on her headphones, opened her journal, and began to write about her plans for Dubai, shopping, beaches, her sister's new apartment, and the excitement of exploring a new city. For the first 2 hours, everything was perfectly normal. The flight attendants rolled their carts down the aisles, offering drinks and meals. A little boy across the aisle was giggling at a cartoon on the screen. The hum of conversation mixed with the steady whir of the engines created a peaceful rhythm. Ava looked out the window and saw endless layers of white clouds glowing under the sunlight. It felt magical, as if the whole world had gone quiet just for her. She didn't notice at first when one of the flight attendants hurried past, her smile slightly forced, her movements sharper than before. The first sign that something was wrong came when the cabin lights flickered once. A soft chime followed, then silence. Ava looked around. The couple next to her paused their movie, exchanging a curious glance. The intercom crackled briefly, but no announcement came through. Then the plane gave a small but noticeable jolt. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She turned toward the window, trying to calm herself. Turbulence, she thought, it's just turbulence. But the uneasy expression on the flight attendants' faces said otherwise. 2 of them were whispering urgently near the cockpit door, one of them knocking rapidly, her face pale. The door remained closed. Another jolt shook the plane, stronger this time. Someone gasped. The calm chatter began to fade, replaced by confused murmurs. Ava felt a chill crawl down her spine. She glanced toward the front again and noticed something strange. The cockpit door was now open, and a male flight attendant was waving frantically for someone to come forward. His voice trembled as he spoke into the intercom, his words sharp and shaky. If there's anyone on board with flight training experience, please come to the cockpit immediately. A stunned silence swept through the cabin. People exchanged looks, their faces filled with disbelief. Then whispers spread quickly like fire. What's happening? Are the pilots okay? Did something happen to them? The tension thickened until it was almost unbearable. Ava felt her hands turn cold. Her mind tried to make sense of what she had just heard. Both pilots, unconscious, no one to fly the plane. A flight attendant, her face streaked with tears, came rushing down the aisle. Please stay calm, she shouted, her voice cracking. But it was too late. The first screams began to rise as the plane dipped slightly, just enough for everyone to feel the weightlessness in their stomachs. Children began crying. The seatbelt signs flashed again. Ava gripped the armrest, her breath coming fast. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears. Somewhere deep inside her, something shifted. A thought, no, a memory, surfaced. When she was 16, her best friend had introduced her to a flight simulator game. They used to spend hours, flying planes on her computer, learning the controls, the instruments, and how to land on virtual runways. She remembered laughing when her virtual plane crashed into pixelated trees. But she also remembered the fascination she felt, the way she learned about altitude, throttle, and navigation. She wasn't a pilot, not even close, but she at least understood the basics. Ava unbuckled her seatbelt. The woman next to her grabbed her wrist. Where are you going? She cried. Ava looked at her with trembling lips. To help. The word sounded ridiculous even to her, but her body moved before her mind could stop it. She pushed through the aisle, holding onto seats as the aircraft trembled again. Flight attendants tried to keep passengers calm, but panic had taken over. A man shouted a prayer. Another tried calling his family on his phone. The sound of crying filled the cabin like thunder. When Ava reached the cockpit door, 2 crew members were standing outside, pale and terrified. One of them looked at her. "Do you have any flying experience?" he asked desperately. Ava swallowed hard. "Only simulators, on a computer," she said softly. The attendant hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "It's more than we have right now. Come in." The cockpit was chaos. Both pilots were slumped over their seats, unconscious, oxygen masks hanging loose. Warning lights flashed across the control panels, and alarms beeped in quick intervals. The view ahead was an endless sky, but the aircraft seemed slightly tilted. Ava's knees almost gave out. She could hardly breathe. The flight attendant quickly handed her the headset. "Talk to them," he urged. The radio crackled, and a calm voice came through. "This is Dubai Air Traffic Control." "Who am I speaking with?" Ava forced her voice to steady. "This is passenger Ava Thompson. The pilots, they're both down. I'm in the cockpit." The voice responded instantly. "Copy that, Ava. Stay calm. We're here with you. Can you see the control yoke in front of you?" Her shaking hands found the control column. "Yes. Good. We're going to guide you step by step. You're not alone." Ava took a deep breath. The fear in her chest didn't disappear, but something else replaced it, a quiet determination. Behind her, she could hear the faint sobs of crew members praying. In front of her, the infinite blue sky stretched endlessly, and in that terrifying emptiness, Ava knew she had no choice but to try. Her mind flashed through everything she had ever learned, every simulator session, every YouTube video she'd watched about takeoffs and landings. Air traffic control instructed her to level the plane, adjust the throttle, and check the autopilot status. She followed each command carefully, her voice trembling as she repeated confirmations. Every movement felt surreal, like she was trapped in a dream where the wrong move could destroy everything. Minutes turned into hours. Sweat dripped down her forehead, her fingers cramped from gripping the controls. The cabin behind her had fallen silent, everyone praying for a miracle. Ava heard one last instruction through the headset: "You're lined up with the runway. Keep your nose steady, reduce your speed slowly, and don't fight the plane. You can do this." Her vision blurred with tears. The ground appeared below, a thin strip of gray surrounded by desert. She felt her body go weightless as the plane descended, alarms blaring once again. She whispered to herself, "Please, please." The aircraft jolted as the wheels touched the runway. A loud thud echoed, followed by a screech, then silence. The plane slowed. It rolled forward, straight and steady, until it finally came to a complete stop. Ava froze. Her hands remained on the controls, her breath shallow. Then, behind her, the cockpit door burst open, and she heard it, the sound of 300 voices cheering, crying, clapping, thanking God. The tension that had gripped her heart broke all at once, replaced by a flood of relief so overwhelming she could hardly breathe. Ava leaned back in the pilot's seat, her body trembling. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She had done it. Somehow, against all odds, she had landed the plane. Later, when rescuers boarded the aircraft, paramedics rushed to treat the pilots, who had suffered from a sudden loss of consciousness due to contaminated cabin air. But the focus was on the young girl who had done the impossible. Cameras flashed, reporters called her a miracle, a hero. But Ava didn't think of herself that way. She just kept replaying the moment in her mind, the silence before touchdown, the voice of the air traffic controller saying, "You did it, Ava. You saved them all." She looked out the cockpit window, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The golden light spread across the sky, calm and endless. And for the first time, she smiled, not out of pride, but out of quiet disbelief. She was just an 18-year-old girl who loved flight simulators. And today, she had saved 300 lives. Suddenly, a voice broke through the speakers, loud and panicked, slicing through the calm like a knife. "Does anyone on board know how to fly a plane?" For a few seconds, no one moved. The words didn't make sense. People looked at one another in confusion, then nervous laughter, then silence. And then the truth began to sink in. Both pilots had collapsed midair. The aircraft was flying thousands of feet above the ground with no one at the controls. Ava froze in her seat, her pen slipping from her hand. Her heart began to pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. Around her, passengers whispered in disbelief. A woman clutched her husband's arm, a child began to cry, and the elderly man 2 rows ahead muttered a prayer under his breath. Then came the sound of alarms from the cockpit, harsh, mechanical beeps that sent chills down everyone's spine. The plane gave a sudden shudder, not a huge drop, but enough to make cups of water spill and bags shift in the overhead bins. A collective gasp filled the cabin. Ava's fingers tightened around her armrest. She looked out the window and saw nothing but endless blue sky, clouds scattered like cotton fields below. The view was still beautiful, but it no longer felt peaceful, it felt terrifying. She looked around at the flight attendants, who were trying to stay calm, their professional smiles cracking under pressure. One of them grabbed the intercom again, her voice trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. We are experiencing a medical emergency in the cockpit." Ava's mind struggled to process what she was hearing. A medical emergency in the cockpit. Both pilots. How was that even possible? She glanced toward the front and saw 2 flight attendants pounding on the cockpit door. "Captain, First Officer, can you hear me?" they shouted. There was no response. Another attendant grabbed the intercom again, repeating the desperate question. "If there is anyone on board with flight experience, please make yourself known immediately." The cabin erupted in murmurs. Some passengers stood up, others fumbled for their phones. A man near the back shouted, "What do you mean no one is flying the plane?" His voice cracked with panic. Another voice, older, shaky, said, "This can't be real." People started crying. The air inside the cabin grew thick and hot, filled with fear. Ava sat frozen, her palms sweating. She could feel her pulse racing so fast it hurt. She was only 18, a teenager who had never even driven a car on a highway alone, yet something inside her stirred. She remembered her computer back home, the countless hours she had spent playing flight simulators. Her best friend used to tease her, "You're practically a pilot, Ava." She used to laugh at that, but now those memories came flooding back, clear and sharp. Every control, every button she had studied for fun suddenly felt important. Could she actually do something? She shook her head. It was insane. This was a real jet, not a video game. Real lives were at stake, 300 souls. What could she possibly do? And yet, the alternative, doing nothing, sitting there as the plane spiraled out of control, terrified her even more. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She unbuckled her seatbelt, ignoring the flight attendant shouting for everyone to stay seated. As she stood up, her knees felt weak, almost like they wouldn't hold her. The couple beside her tried to stop her. "Where are you going?" the woman cried. Ava swallowed hard. "I have to try." The man frowned in confusion. "Try what?" But she didn't answer. She stepped into the aisle, her legs trembling, her heart hammering in her chest. The plane shuddered again, a low, eerie rumble echoing from the engines. Passengers screamed. Luggage rattled above her. The flight attendants were rushing between rows, trying to calm the chaos. Ava pushed forward, gripping each seat as she passed. "Please stay seated," one attendant shouted, but Ava called back, "I can help." The woman blinked, stunned. "Are you a pilot?" Ava shook her head, breathless. "No, but I've practiced, on flight simulators. I know the controls." The attendant hesitated for a moment that felt like forever, then finally nodded. "Come with me." They hurried toward the front of the plane. Ava's mind was spinning. Every step felt heavier, like walking through water. The screams and cries behind her faded into a blur. She could only hear the rapid thumping of her heart and the high-pitched alarm beeping from the cockpit. When she reached the door, she saw 2 crew members kneeling beside the pilots. Both men were slumped in their seats, unmoving, pale. Oxygen masks hung loosely from above. A flight attendant's voice cracked as she said, "They're breathing, but barely. They're not responding." The radio crackled with static. "Flight 407, this is Dubai Air Traffic Control, do you copy?" No one answered. The attendant looked at Ava. "You said you can fly a simulator." Ava nodded slowly. Her throat felt dry, her body trembling. "I know it's not the same, but I understand the instruments. The basics." The woman hesitated only a moment before pressing a code into the cockpit door. "Then go," she said. "You're all we have." The cockpit was small, filled with blinking lights and flashing screens. The noise was overwhelming: alarms, beeps, the hum of engines, and the voice of air traffic control calling out for a response. Ava stepped forward cautiously, her legs shaking. She had never been so terrified in her life. She sat in the pilot's seat, the real one, not a gaming chair, not in her bedroom, but in an actual airplane flying miles above the earth. Her fingers hovered over the controls, uncertain. The headset was hanging to the side. She grabbed it and put it on, her voice barely steady as she pressed the button. This is passenger Ava Thompson. The pilots are unconscious. Please help me. The response came immediately. Copy that, Ava. Stay calm. We're with you. Can you see the control column in front of you? She looked at the yoke, the familiar shape of it sending a chill through her. Yes, she whispered. Okay, said the voice, calm but firm. We're going to take this one step at a time. You're doing great. First, tell me your altitude and airspeed. Ava looked at the screens, her eyes darting over the dials. Altitude is 36,000 feet, airspeed is 450 knots. Good, said the voice. Engage the autopilot if it's not already on. There should be a button labeled AP. She searched quickly, her fingers trembling, then pressed it. The alarms quieted slightly. The plane steadied. Good job, Ava. You've just stabilized the aircraft. Behind her, one of the flight attendants placed a hand on her shoulder. You're doing amazing, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Ava didn't respond. Her focus was locked on the instruments, every sense heightened. She could feel every vibration, every sound, every movement of the aircraft. The air traffic controller continued guiding her. Ava, we're going to prepare you for descent. Are you ready? She hesitated, her breath shaking. I think so. You're brave, the voice said softly. You've got 300 people depending on you. And you can do this. The next 30 minutes felt like hours. Ava followed each instruction carefully, adjusting the throttle, steering slightly left to maintain heading, keeping the altitude steady. Her arms ached, her back was drenched in sweat, but she didn't stop. She kept her voice calm, repeating each order exactly as told. Every so often, she glanced over at the pilots, still unconscious, and a wave of fear tried to take over. What if she failed? What if she did something wrong? But she pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option, not now. Okay, Ava, the voice said after what felt like an eternity. You're lined up for approach. Reduce your speed to 180 knots. Keep the nose level. She followed the instructions, her lips moving silently as she repeated the numbers. Her eyes darted to the runway in the distance, a thin gray line in a sea of sand and light. Her throat tightened. I see it, she whispered. Good. Don't rush it, just let the plane glide. Keep your hands steady. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could barely hear. The ground grew closer and closer. She heard the landing gear deploy, the thud vibrating through the cockpit. You're almost there, said the voice. Flare gently before touchdown. She pulled back slightly on the yoke. The runway rushed up to meet them. The plane jolted, once, then twice, the tires screeching against the asphalt. For a moment she thought she had crashed, but then she felt it, the smooth, steady roll as the plane slowed. The beeping stopped. The alarms went silent. Ava let out a strangled sob. It's on the ground, she whispered. Behind her, a flight attendant cried out, she did it. We're down. The cabin erupted in cheers and tears. People were hugging, praying, clapping, sobbing with relief. Ava sat frozen, her hands still gripping the controls, unable to believe what had just happened. Excellent work, Ava, the voice in her headset said softly. You just landed the plane. You saved everyone. The tears finally came, hot and uncontrollable. Her whole body shook as the weight of what she'd done hit her. She had taken control of an aircraft with 300 people aboard, guided by nothing but courage and a calm voice on the other end of the radio. When the rescue team entered the cockpit minutes later, Ava could barely move. The world outside was a blur of flashing lights, shouting medics, and camera flashes. But inside, she sat still, staring at the controls. Her reflection in the glass showed a girl who looked both terrified and powerful, a girl who had faced the impossible and survived. She took a deep breath, the air sharp and cold. The chaos around her faded, replaced by a quiet hum in her ears. And in that stillness, she whispered the words she had been too afraid to say before, I can't believe I just did that. She looked out at the sunrise breaking over the horizon. The golden light poured through the cockpit windows, washing over her face. Somewhere behind her, passengers were chanting her name. But she didn't think of herself as a hero. She thought of the voice that guided her, the people who believed in her, and the moment she chose to stand up when everyone else froze. And in that moment, high above fear and disbelief, Ava Thompson, an 18-year-old girl who once played flight simulators for fun, became the reason 300 people saw another sunrise. Ava rushed toward the cockpit, her legs barely carrying her as the plane rattled beneath her feet. The air inside the cabin was thick with fear. People were crying, praying, shouting questions no one could answer. Some clutched their children, others held onto their seats as if that alone could keep them safe. But Ava could hear nothing clearly anymore, not the screams, not the panic, just the pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears. Her hands trembled, her breaths came in shallow gasps, but she didn't stop moving. The flight attendants were shouting into their radios, faces pale and wet with tears. When they saw her approach, one of them tried to stop her. "Miss, you can't," but Ava cut her off, her voice breaking but firm. "I have to try, please." The attendant looked into her eyes and saw something, fear, yes, but also resolve. After a brief hesitation, she nodded and motioned toward the door. The door to the cockpit was half open, a haunting sight. The sound of alarms blaring inside made Ava's stomach twist. She pushed through and froze. Both pilots were slumped over their seats, unconscious. The overhead lights flashed red, the control panels filled with blinking warnings, the radio buzzing with static and distant voices trying to make contact. The smell of metal, sweat, and burning electronics filled the air. Ava's heart sank. This wasn't a simulator, this was real. The lives of everyone on board depended on what she would do next. For a few seconds, she stood frozen, paralyzed by the sight. Her mind screamed that she wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't trained for this. She was just a teenager who liked to play flight simulator games for fun. But then another part of her, the part that refused to surrender, whispered something louder, "You can try." She moved toward the captain's seat, her knees shaking so badly she had to steady herself on the armrest. "Sir," she whispered, tapping the captain's shoulder, hoping he'd wake up. Nothing. His head lolled to one side, his face pale. The first officer didn't move either. Ava swallowed the lump in her throat and lowered herself into the captain's seat. Her hands hovered over the controls, uncertain where to begin. Everything looked both familiar and alien. She recognized the layout from her simulator, but here, the buttons glowed, the levers felt heavy, and the constant vibration of the plane made everything seem alive. The headset hung from a hook beside the console. Ava grabbed it and pressed it against her ear with shaking fingers. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "This is passenger Ava, the pilots are down. Repeat, both pilots are unconscious. Please help me." There was static at first, long, empty seconds that made her want to scream. Then a calm, steady voice came through. "Copy that, Ava. This is Dubai Air Traffic Control. We hear you loud and clear. Stay calm. We're going to guide you through this, step by step." Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but relief. Someone was there, someone who knew what to do. "Okay," she whispered, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Please tell me what to do." "First," the controller said, "look at your main panel. Do you see the autopilot switch?" She scanned the dashboard. Her fingers brushed over dozens of buttons until she found it. "Yes," she said quickly. "Good. Make sure it's on. It should keep the plane stable while we talk." Ava pressed the switch, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the shaking eased slightly. The plane leveled out. Her breathing slowed just a little. "Excellent," said the voice. "You're doing great. Now, tell me what your altitude is." Ava's eyes darted across the panel. 36,000 feet. Perfect. Keep it there for now. We'll work on descent soon. Right now, Ava, I need you to stay as calm as you can. You're safe, the passengers are safe, and we're right here with you." Her throat tightened. She nodded, even though they couldn't see her. "I'll try," she whispered. The cockpit was hot and noisy, lights blinking and warning chimes sounding every few seconds. Behind her, a flight attendant peeked through the doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked. Ava forced herself to nod. "I think so," she said softly, even though her heart was hammering. "All right, Ava," said the controller again, his voice calm but firm. "We're going to check your heading. Look at the screen in front of you. Do you see a number under, HDG?" "Yes," she said after a second. 270. "Good. That means you're heading east. Keep it steady. Don't touch the yoke yet, okay? Okay. Now, we're going to talk about landing, but before that, I need you to check your fuel." Ava followed each instruction carefully, her hands trembling but precise. Every time she hesitated, the voice guided her gently. "You're doing just fine," he said often, and every time, it gave her strength. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat trickled down her temples. Her palms were slick on the controls. The cockpit felt smaller by the minute, the hum of the engines filling her ears like thunder. She could feel the weight of 300 lives pressing down on her shoulders. Every mistake could mean disaster. Then the controller's voice came again, softer this time. Ava, how are you holding up? She swallowed hard. I'm scared, she admitted. That's okay. Fear means you understand how serious this is. But I promise you, we're not letting you go through this alone. Those words hit her harder than she expected. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a spark of courage. Okay, she said, tell me what to do next. All right, the voice replied. We're starting your descent. I want you to slowly bring down your throttle. That's the lever on your left. Pull it back gently. Ava placed her hand on the throttle, her grip trembling. She pulled it back a few inches, feeling the engine's roar soften. The plane dipped slightly. The passengers probably felt it, but the voice quickly reassured her. Good, perfect, that's it. You're doing beautifully. You've just started your descent. Ava stared out the window. The sky stretched endlessly around her, a mix of blue and gold as the sun began to set. Far below, the faint curve of the earth was visible, glowing softly against the fading light. It was breathtaking, and terrifying. The descent took time. Every few minutes, air traffic control gave her new instructions: adjust your heading, lower your altitude, check your airspeed. She repeated every word back, her voice steadier now. It felt like her mind had split in two. One part was terrified and trembling, the other was focused, logical, calm. At one point, the voice told her, "You're doing better than most trained pilots would under this pressure." She let out a shaky laugh, half crying, half smiling. "That's hard to believe." "It's true," he said. "You've got nerves of steel, Ava." Her chest tightened with emotion. She didn't feel like she had nerves of steel. She felt like she could fall apart at any second. But she kept going. The clouds began to clear as the ground grew closer. The lights of a city glittered in the distance, Dubai. Her stomach flipped. "I can see it," she whispered. "Good," said the controller. "You're lined up with the runway. Listen carefully now, Ava. We're going to bring you down safely. Keep your eyes on the horizon and follow my voice." Her hands gripped the yoke. Every muscle in her body was tense. Her breathing came in quick bursts. "Okay," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "Start reducing speed." 170 knots, said the controller. "Deploy your flaps." That's the lever-marked flap. She did as told. The plane's nose tilted slightly, the engines roared, and she felt a deep vibration through the seat. The descent became steeper. The runway lights glowed brighter ahead, like a path of stars leading her home. "Perfect, Ava. Keep the nose level. Don't fight it, just guide it." Her vision blurred with tears. Her arms ached from gripping the controls so tightly. "It's coming too fast," she said. "You're fine. Trust the plane. Trust yourself." The ground raced up toward them. The alarms blared again. Ava's body screamed in panic, but she didn't let go. "Pull back gently," said the voice. She did. The nose lifted slightly. The wheels hit the ground with a heavy thud, bounced once, then again, before catching the runway solidly. A thunderous roar filled the air as the engines reversed thrust. The plane slowed. The vibration eased. And then, silence. Ava froze, staring straight ahead. The plane had stopped. She blinked, unable to believe it. Her breath came in short gasps. It's on the ground," she whispered. "Confirmed," said the voice softly. "You did it, Ava. You landed the aircraft. You saved everyone." Behind her, the cockpit door burst open, and a flight attendant sobbed with relief. "We're down. She did it." The sound of applause and crying echoed through the cabin. People hugged one another, some fell to their knees in prayer. Ava sat back in the seat, her entire body trembling. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her eyes were filled with tears. The controller's voice came one last time. "You were extraordinary, Ava. Remember that." When the emergency crews arrived minutes later, Ava still hadn't taken off the headset. She just stared at the lights flashing outside the window. Everything felt unreal. She finally whispered, "I just wanted to go see my sister." The flight attendant beside her smiled through tears. "You did more than that. You became a hero." Ava looked out at the dawn breaking over the horizon. Her reflection stared back, tired, scared, but alive. In that moment, she realized that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about doing what had to be done, even when your hands were shaking. And as the world called her a miracle, she sat there quietly, whispering to herself, "I just did what I had to do." As the jet approached the runway, the cabin fell into a silence so deep that even the hum of the engines felt distant. Every passenger on board held their breath, hearts pounding in unison, eyes wide with fear and hope. Mothers clutched their children tightly, whispering silent prayers. Couples held hands, tears trembling on their lashes. Some closed their eyes, too afraid to watch what would happen next. The entire aircraft, 300 souls suspended between life and death, waited for one teenage girl to perform a miracle. Inside the cockpit, Ava sat rigid in the captain's seat, her back soaked with sweat, her hands shaking violently on the controls. Her mouth was dry, her throat burning from hours of breathing fast and shallow. She could barely hear anything except the pounding of her own heart. The lights of the runway stretched ahead like a glowing river, a narrow path between darkness and salvation. Her breathing came out in sharp, uneven bursts. "I'm doing my best," she whispered into the headset, her voice cracking. The calm voice from air traffic control responded softly, steady as ever. "You're doing more than your best, Ava. You're bringing them home. You're almost there. Keep your nose level and stay with me." The words gave her a tiny spark of strength, enough to keep her hands steady. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the yoke. Every movement mattered now. A wrong angle, a wrong tilt, and the plane could break apart before it even touched the ground. She remembered what they had told her minutes earlier: trust the plane, trust yourself. But it was easier said than done. Her body trembled, her vision blurred with sweat and tears, yet she refused to give in to panic. Through the windshield, she could see the ground rushing closer, the lights flashing faster. The plane's shadow grew larger, darker, swallowing the runway. Her breath caught. Altitude 100 feet, the controller said. "Steady now, Ava." Flare gently before touchdown. She pulled back slightly on the yoke, her arms straining. The massive jet responded like a living creature, slower than she wanted, heavier than she expected. The engines roared in her ears, the wheels spinning in anticipation. For a split second, everything seemed to stop: the air, the sound, even time itself. Then came the jolt. The wheels touched the runway with a thunderous thud. The plane bounced once, then again, before gripping the ground. Ava's eyes widened in disbelief. She could feel the vibration of the tires as they roared against the asphalt, the force pulling her forward in her seat. She gritted her teeth and pushed down on the brakes, just as she had been instructed. The nose dipped slightly, the engine screamed, and the jet began to slow. Behind her, the passengers could feel it too, the sudden shift from terror to motion, from weightless chaos to the solid certainty of the ground. Someone gasped, another cried out, "We're on the ground." The word spread through the cabin like wildfire. Ava didn't move. She stared straight ahead, hands still gripping the controls, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Reverse thrust," the voice in her headset instructed calmly. She reached for the lever, pulled it back, and heard the engines shift into reverse with a deep mechanical roar. The aircraft slowed more and more until, finally, after what felt like an eternity, the speed dropped to zero. The motion stopped. The noise faded. Silence. Ava blinked. For a second, she didn't believe it. Her brain refused to accept that it was over, that the plane, that she, had survived. She took one long, shuddering breath. The voice in her headset spoke again, gentle this time, almost like a whisper. "Ava, you did it. You landed the plane. Everyone is safe." And that was when it hit her. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes, hot and uncontrollable. Her whole body felt weak, every muscle trembling. She let out a broken sob, one that had been trapped in her chest since the first moment she'd heard the word emergency. Her shaking hand slowly fell away from the controls, and she slumped back in the seat, breathing hard. Her headset slid slightly off her ear, but she didn't care. Behind her, the cockpit door burst open. A flight attendant stumbled in, her face streaked with tears. "We're down," she cried, voice shaking with disbelief. She did it. The plane landed. The sound that followed was unlike anything Ava had ever heard, a wave of cheers, sobs, prayers, and laughter crashing through the cabin. People were hugging each other, crying openly. A mother pressed her baby against her chest, whispering thank yous through tears. A man fell to his knees in the aisle, hands clasped in prayer. Even the flight attendants, who were trained to remain composed no matter what, broke down completely, holding each other and weeping. Ava sat there motionless, listening to it all. Every sound, every cry, every thank you echoed in her ears like music. Her breathing slowed, her tears continued to fall, but now they were different, not of fear, but of relief. Paramedics and airport staff rushed toward the aircraft the moment it stopped. The runway lights flashed, emergency vehicles surrounded the jet, and sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Over the radio, air traffic control's voice came one last time. "You were incredible, Ava. You just saved 300 lives." She didn't know how to respond. The words sounded too big, too heavy. She wasn't incredible, she was just a terrified girl who refused to give up. She reached up and removed the headset slowly, setting it down on the console. Her reflection in the windshield caught her eye, pale face, red eyes, tears running down her cheeks, hair sticking to her forehead. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like a girl who had seen the edge of death and somehow stepped back. As the emergency team entered the cockpit, she tried to stand, but her legs gave out. One of the medics caught her gently. "Easy," he said softly. "You're safe now." She nodded weakly, unable to speak. Her throat ached. When she was escorted out of the cockpit, the sight that greeted her took her breath away. Every single passenger had stood up to see her. Applause erupted, loud and thunderous, echoing through the entire cabin. People reached out their hands toward her, crying, clapping, whispering words of gratitude. "Thank you. You saved us. God bless you." The sound overwhelmed her. She covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling over again. She had never been applauded for anything in her life, not like this. Not by 300 people whose lives she had just saved. Someone handed her a blanket, another a bottle of water. The flight attendants hugged her tightly, their voices trembling with emotion. "You're a hero, Ava," one whispered in her ear. "You're an absolute miracle." Outside, the early morning light was breaking over the horizon. The sun cast golden rays across the tarmac, painting the world in soft warmth. Reporters were already gathering beyond the airport barriers, their cameras flashing. Fire trucks stood by with their lights spinning. And amidst all of it, Ava stood barefoot on the runway, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the massive jet she had just landed. She could still feel the vibrations of the engines in her chest, still hear the echoes of the alarms in her mind. It didn't feel real. It felt like waking up from a dream she couldn't fully understand. Someone from the control tower came running toward her, the voice she had heard guiding her through the radio. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes but a proud smile. "You must be Ava," he said, breathless. She nodded. He extended his hand. "You did something extraordinary today." Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "I was so scared," she said softly. "I thought we were all going to die." He shook his head gently. "Fear keeps us alive. Courage is acting despite that fear. And that's exactly what you did." She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, tears filling her eyes again. Around them, paramedics were checking passengers, the pilots were being carried away on stretchers, and rescue workers were moving in and out of the aircraft. But the world felt oddly quiet to Ava, like everything had slowed down. She looked back at the jet one last time. The giant machine that had almost become a tomb for hundreds of people now stood still, harmless, beautiful even. The rising sun reflected off its silver wings, and for a moment, Ava felt something shift inside her, not pride, exactly, but peace. She thought of her parents, who would be waking up soon, expecting a call to say she landed safely. They would never have imagined what had actually happened. She smiled faintly through her exhaustion, knowing the news would reach them soon enough. As she walked toward the ambulance, a small child broke free from her mother's arms and ran up to her, clutching a tiny teddy bear. "You saved us," the little girl said, her voice trembling. Ava knelt down, her eyes wet again, and hugged her tightly. "No," she whispered, "we all made it together." Later, as the sun climbed higher and the noise of the rescue faded into the distance, Ava sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the sky. The same sky that had terrified her hours ago now looked calm, endless, and familiar again. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The words from the air traffic controller echoed softly in her mind, "You're bringing them home." And she had. An 18-year-old girl, alone, terrified, but unyielding, had done what no one thought possible. 300 people were alive because she didn't give up. She hadn't been trained, hadn't been ready, but she had something stronger, courage born in the moment it was needed most. That day, the world would call her a hero. News outlets across the globe would replay her story, headlines would call her the girl who landed the impossible flight. But to Ava, it wasn't about fame or glory. It was about survival, about faith, about doing what needed to be done when there was no one else to do it. As she watched the sun rise higher, she whispered softly to herself, her voice filled with disbelief and gratitude, "We made it." And for the first time since that terrible moment when the voice on the intercom had asked for a miracle, she allowed herself to smile, not out of pride, but because she knew that on that day, above fear and chaos, she had found the strength to save them all.